Good afternoon, and welcome to the Voice of Wisdom. With over 60 years of experience as an investment banker, entrepreneur, investment analyst, economist, and venture capitalist, Morty Davis is Wall Street and capitalism personified. The over 400 companies for which he has raised more than $3 billion over the years have created a countless number of jobs and exciting new products. Through the Voice of Wisdom, Mr. Davis explores, analyzes, and debates the most topical political, economic, and social issues facing our world today. Joining Mr. Davis today for a discussion on Ukraine is Matt Galwey, a law student at Fordham University and honors graduate in history from Colby College, and tied in remotely, Ben Goldstein, an honors student majoring in statistics at Cornell University. And now, Mr. Davis, Mr. Galwey, and Mr. Goldstein.
Welcome back to my precious listeners and fellow participants in our Wednesday evening hot date. We should have a really intriguing and exciting evening because Len Katz brought in two young men that are brilliant and charming and personable, and were recruited to beat me up on my views on Ukraine. So without further ado, let me introduce, let me have them give their opening remarks. I've been against the United States launching that response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and I'll describe exactly why. But let me hear why these guys were so enthusiastic about the United States stepping into another war. So
you want to go first, Ben?
Yeah, sure. I'll take this. So first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on this show. And I'm excited to get started. So I guess to sum up, I take issue with the premise of the United States getting involved in another war, per se. And I think this has been rhetoric that I've seen from a lot of the anti-interventionist camp for a while. I want to be clear here. We are not sending soldiers on the ground to fight and die in Ukraine. We are not goading Ukraine into NATO membership. What we are simply doing is giving Ukraine monetary, military, and humanitarian support that will help them on their own fend off an invasion from Russia that poses not only a threat to Ukrainian lives and to Ukrainian society, but also, as we can see, given the implications this has in the Baltics, given the implications this has had in the Caucasian region, given the implication that this has had for years in Eastern Europe, I see this very much as an incursion into democratic Europe and into the American and Western sphere of influence, and a fight for sovereignty and containment of one of the United States' principal adversaries, not a war that the United States is getting involved in, not a situation in which American lives are being lost. And so, from my standpoint, should we be spending a single-digit proportion of our defense budget, which I know we've discussed in a previous episode, might be too high, might not be, but should we be spending a single-digit proportion of our defense budget on not only containing are arguably one of our top adversaries, but getting another military to do it for us, and at the same time protecting democratic Europe? I think so.
Matt, you want to?
So thank you for
thank
you for having me on the show.
Thank you for joining me.
It's
for not beating up on it.
It's a pleasure to be here. So I guess I would say that. I would take issue with the idea that
that you let Russia get away with it.
No, so I think since 2008 in particular, we've allowed Russia and Vladimir. Since Vladimir Putin truly became a dictator in 2000. So in the late 90s, he was actually winning elections democratically. But since he's become a real dictator and consolidated power, we've let him get away with murder, both literally and figuratively. He's been murdering. In 2000, he starts murdering journalists. Okay. Literally murdering them and opposition leaders in the early 2000s. Then in 2008, he annexes part of Georgia, and just a slap on the wrist. And we're becoming more energy and grain reliant on him. Then he annexes a territory in Crimea, which, he just invades and takes over. And then he starts an insurrection in 2014, more slaps on the wrist. And then he shoots down a commercial airline. So I think that there is a Russian geopolitical threat to, and really, I think that if we want to live in a Western world, in the traditional sense, rule of law, all the things that you built your career off, free and open markets, free monetary policy, living in a society where people can apply for loans, all these different things. That's not really what Russia represents. Russia represents the reverse of it. So does China. And so I think there has to be a line in the sand. And I think that Ukraine is an excellent example of this. And I think this discussion should also be centered around by the fact that the only reason we're even here is because of Ukrainian resolve and valor against a military far superior to them. So I think that should be acknowledged at the beginning. So I think we are an empire, and the U.S. dollar is the most powerful currency in the world. But there are certain values that we hold, and I think that Ukraine is an excellent way to deter the rise in authoritarianism that we've seen since the Cold War.
Okay, good intro, guys. Thank you. My view is, and I think you have more at stake, you and Ben, than I have, because you're at an age where if a war widens between the United States and any other country to the point where we resorted to the same thing we did in the Second World War, a draft, and the Vietnam War, a draft of young people, you guys would still have your lives at risk and your survival in one piece, even if you lived through the war, and or that even if you didn't suffer actual physical injury, the trauma of war we find for all those that come back from Vietnam and these other places we've chosen to enter wars in. And my first issue is even broader than Ukraine and Russia. The United States has become the most belligerent country in the world ever since the Second World War, without any real benefits for the United States. For example, we haven't won a war since the Second World War, which we've actually won. We insisted on what's it called? Unequivocal, unconditional surrender, and we took over the countries. We didn't even just put in their have their election within a few months or a year. It took 8 years for us to allow elections in Japan and an equivalent amount of time till we really sort of got everybody to adhere to our guidance as to how the country should behave, how the military should behave. So after that, we had the Korean War. We haven't won that war. We lost terrible amount of an enormous amount of our young people, men and women, and treasure, and we still haven't made a peace treaty with North Korea. Then we entered the Vietnam War for whatever reason I'll never understand. We had no dog in that fight. and we lost tremendous amount of human life, not only our own people, but the enemy. Most laws are sort of made up of young people killing other young people, because old generals stand behind and send young people to the front to fight in wars. I have a theory that they've done that traditionally, so they get rid of all the young people, so all the young ladies are left for them, for these old generals. But the lives that we lost, I can't think of anything more precious than the young people we send to war, and the other side sends to war too. And you have no personal animosity to those guys. You're only there because the generals or your country sends you there to kill as many as fast as you can. You might be, if you got an introduction to them on a social event, you might be best friends with them, and here you're looking to maim them and kill them, and they're looking to do that to you too. So we lost the Korean War. We didn't win the Vietnam War. We entered the Iraq War. It's hard to tell if we won or lost because we immediately installed their president and their cabinet and everything. And then we had to ask them for permission to do different things. If we insisted that an American military personnel serving in Iraq committed some crime, we wanted to have the prerogative of dealing with that issue, just in our view, justly and fairly. But they said, no, they're in charge. It's their country, and they wouldn't give us even that privilege, even though we were given our lives and our blood and our treasure. It was outrageous. We did not win the war. They took over the country, and we had the privilege of sacrificing lives and spending literally trillions, not billions, trillions of dollars. And the same goes for Afghan. And if you guys have any knowledge of history, the Monroe Doctrine, Monroe preached that we should stay out of foreign wars, long-distance wars. We should be only involved in North America and South America, this part of the world. And we've now become policemen, or whatever you want to call it, throughout the world, and we want to impose our values. Our values, I believe, are the best in the world. There's never been any country with the fairness and with the opportunities of the United States. But we can't impose our views or hope to get them done in no time at all, as we did with the Arab Spring. You can't change people overnight, and you can't change administrations overnight, and behavior overnight, and cultures overnight. So the only war we won, and it was absolutely brilliant, on the part of a guy I loved, Ronald Reagan, because Ronald Reagan went to war against Grenada, and we had an overwhelming victory, particularly because they had no army, no navy, no air. We bombed a lunatic asylum. I think we killed about 3 people, but we won that war. And as Jackie Mason was fond of saying, he said he's so happy when he won the war against Grenada, because he no longer goes to sleep worrying about Grenada and fusing, that's the wrong word, starting a surprise attack, launching a surprise attack against the United States one night while he's sleeping. So psychologically, Ronald Reagan was brilliant because he knew that we needed a win, and he didn't pick on anybody that would be a real problem, and we'd have to leave as we have recently with our tails behind our back. So, what's the alternative? You might say we have to do it because it's only right. It makes the world a better place and so forth. But we should think about diplomacy, and can we settle these things without going to war?
Are you talking about in Ukraine specifically?
Particularly in Ukraine.
Right.
But let me tell you what the deal was, and so you can respond to this. Putin said, if you don't if you prevent Ukraine from joining NATO, I won't launch this attack.
I don't believe him.
Okay, I agree with you. I don't believe him either. But what's the risk of testing them and saying, okay, we won't let NATO. It's not like we needed Ukraine and NATO. We had 20 countries. It's not that NATO is going to strengthen it. It might be good for that Ukraine wants it. But remember, Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, and he wasn't attacking a country that wasn't formally part of Russia.
Well,
and then if you said, well, like Chamberlain, that was an embarrassment to the West in the Second World War, where he went to meet with Hitler and he gave him Czechoslovakia and some other Sudetenland, yeah, some other territory, and he came back to England and he said he made peace forever and there won't be any war. And it turned out Chamberlain was embarrassed. He lost the election. He was even died very quickly after that because he felt it was the wrong thing to do. I don't think it was the wrong thing to do. We wound up the same as we would have wound up whether he'd made that deal, and at least he tried. And now, if we tried with Putin and said, look, you stay out of this, you don't launch anything, we won't let them into NATO. But if you launch anything, we're going to be we, NATO, and the United States will be actively involved against you. That's negotiating. And think of it this way. How would we feel? How did we feel when Russia put armaments and nukes in Cuba, or if they put them in the Bahamas or Mexico? They were, what do you call it? NATO was already on the border of Russia, by Poland, by Hungary. It was outrageous for us to say that we needed NATO Ukraine to be in NATO. I'm finished.
So a couple things. First, with the Chamberlain example, Hitler was really, really afraid at Munich in '38 that the Czechs just weren't going to give up and he was going to have to go to war. I mean, he was horrified. And he had been spending so recklessly in the country and the military that the generals were on the cusp of overthrowing him because they thought he was a lunatic. So there's actually some counterfactual history that suggests that if the Western Allies had held their back, that there may have been a coup, because a lot of the German generals, didn't think they were ready for war in '38. So holding steadfast may have actually been better. And Hitler didn't think the Western Allies were going to go to war over Poland. He was shocked when they did. He was the personal descriptions of him right after war was declared.
I don't know if you're rewriting history.
No, I'm not.
I lived through that period.
No. But
and Hitler was ready to launch.
No, what I mean,
attack against Poland, against Czechoslovakia, and that was his plan.
But he didn't think.
And I don't know that you could say that the generals were against him. They were all gung-ho for the war and gung-ho for taking over the world.
Once they had won, but not before they had. Once they had taken before they had taken all the territory, they weren't. But back to NATO. First off, NATO is not like a U.S.-controlled alliance. It's a defensive alliance that countries. The only reason why NATO has expanded is because countries are desperate to get into NATO because they're afraid of Russia. I mean, for years, Russia's been cutting the Wi-Fi cables underneath the ocean that runs across that ocean. They've been, for God's sakes, in Ukraine, they shot down a commercial plane. So Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland. NATO is this rough alliance where you get, everywhere from France to Turkey. I mean, it's kind of this rambling alliance. It's not like the Warsaw Pact. It's not like a puppeteer controlling all the strings.
It may be a lot worse. Think of it this way. We have a guarantee for all 20 nations in NATO that if they get attacked, the United States will enter the war against that enemy.
But it's a defensive.
Why would you get... Trump was ready to blow NATO away completely. I didn't love Trump's approach.
But that may have led to...
it may have led to nothing.
No, it probably would have led to more Russian aggression in Eastern Europe. Because the only reason Putin hasn't increased his aggression in Eastern Europe is because of NATO. Why hasn't he attacked? I mean, he could very easily roll over the Baltic. That he's made that clear. It's been clear by all his aggression that he annexed a territory in 2008. He started a proxy war in 2014. He annexed more territory in 2014. 2015, 2016, he interferes in our election.
He took the view that it was part of the Soviet Union.
Right. Again,
it wasn't taking over territory.
But the Baltic,
it wasn't taking over territory in Europe or
the Baltic states were part of Europe. Were part of the Soviet Union. And
so
was a lot of Poland. So that's what's
no,
next.
Poland wasn't part of
Yes, it was.
The Soviet Union. Never.
Yes, it was.
No.
After World War II, it was.
It was never part of the Soviet Union. It might have been taken over by Russia as we took over. If we took over Iraq and won the war,
but the troops
was Iraq part of the United States?
But the troops left.
The troops left where?
Iraq. We didn't make Iraq the 51st state. The troops left.
Our troops left Iraq?
When? After a while, they left. There aren't thousands of U.S.
We were there for many, many years.
Yeah, but they eventually left. The Russian troops never left Eastern Europe.
No, they didn't. When they weren't in Poland afterwards.
Yeah, they were in Poland until 1994. There were thousands of Russian troops. There were tens of thousands of Russian troops.
So what? We have thousands of troops in South Korea.
Voluntarily.
We have thousands of troops in Germany. We have
by their consent.
We have troops all over the world.
But that's by their consent.
I know, but what are we doing there? We're spending billions and trillions of dollars, and we're exposing ourselves to war every time.
But this is the question. We like this global.
Why not work on diplomacy instead of risking American lives all the time and entering wars all the time?
We have tried to reset the diplomacy with Putin, going all the way back.
What kind of diplomacy? The UN is the only diplomacy, and it hasn't done anything.
Bush tried to reset relations with Putin. Obama tried to do the same thing. Trump said he trusted Putin over his own intelligence agencies. Remember that?
We don't try to. We don't try to do anything like that. We try to do what.
But why should we?
We use our power.
Why should we?
Like you said, we're the most powerful country in the world. It's almost the burden of staying the most powerful that we got to make sure that nobody else becomes powerful. Look at us, the same situation we have with Taiwan. We're going to wind up in a major world war over Taiwan when Taiwan was part of China.
Yeah, but just because
so I don't understand why we have that right, privilege. If we can negotiate some peaceful settlement, give something, work out something, that's the way to do it. Not to be at war all the time. No other country in the world is at war or sells as much. Our biggest export is military equipment. All the wars are fought with our equipment. It's outrageous. I mean, if the United States weren't around, there'd probably be far fewer wars because we fund every war.
I don't know about that.
What do you mean? Every armament.
I think there'd be a lot more tyranny in the world.
It's not our business to straighten out the whole world. That's not the role of a country. Monroe said, if we're attacked, we've never been attacked. We're the only country that's never been attacked in the whole history of the human race. And we're the most
What
beloved.
about Japan?
We were the United States,
The mainland.
the country, the Philippines. What was attacked? Manila or something?
But let me ask.
That was an attack. That was an attack about ships.
Let me ask. You made your career investing, probably a lot of investing overseas, open markets, easy to exchange currencies, all that stuff. None of that is possible. None of it is possible in a world that's dominated by authoritarians.
I don't know why you say that.
No,
We're the biggest investors in China.
no, right. That's because
supposedly China was authoritarian. We were big investors in Americans were big investors in Russia. We're big investors in all in Saudi Arabia. What's more authoritarian than Saudi Arabia? I mean, this is. It's almost like you're repeating popular propaganda that's not popular. I mean, I don't know why you say that. I believe in all the countries working together, not having immediately a new enemy. We always have got to have a new enemy. China's not a big enemy. All these years that China's grown, we've both China and the United States has grown rapidly, more than ever before, without being at war with each other. Yeah, they steal technology from us, and we steal other things from them. If you want to have a war, you have a war. I wish we could all get together and find an enemy somewhere in outer space, so we could all cooperate and be,
But here's
like a family. We're all on the same boat.
I think it would be better if we could use the tremendous resources of this country to support global democracy. I just think that's good.
I'm in favor of that, but not going to war.
Right.
If the only way to,
But I don't think we should go to war.
we wind up in wars.
I don't
And
think-
potentially in a nuclear war, even because we insisted that Ukraine should be allowed in NATO. You try it. Diplomacy
but they never
is what's trying.
But they were never even. Ukraine is closer to being in NATO now than it was before the war.
Absolutely.
Right, but it was never going to be in NATO to begin with.
No, but all Putin said, he articulated this specifically. He said, if you prevent NATO, Ukraine from entering NATO, I have no.
Yeah, but that's like, it's kind of like saying, I've already raped a woman once, right? Now, if you promise to not prosecute me on this, it won't happen again. So Putin invaded Ukraine twice, in Luhansk and Donetsk and Crimea, 2 times. He basically started an insurrection in northern Ukraine, and then in Crimea, he just invaded.
I'm not justifying that.
He just invaded.
But it's not the same as invading a foreign country. He wanted to rebuild the Soviet Union. That's a prerogative that he has.
It's not.
Let me tell you something. The worst thing that the United States ever did, in my view,
it's his prerogative to rebuild the Soviet Union.
Let me tell you my view. The worst thing the United States ever did, strategically, was after the Soviet Union broke up. Right after it broke up, not long afterwards, we started to put missiles on its borders in Poland and Hungary. Instead of saying, wait. There's other ways to deal with things. Instead of saying, now you're good guys, we want to invite you into NATO to be part of the good guys. Right? If you treat me like an enemy, I'm going to be an enemy. Why put missiles after they behaved, after you got what you wanted?
But this is the problem, though. Sorry.
No, I just want to let Ben in at some juncture, but go ahead.
What I would say is, this is the problem, though. We did do that. We sent Gorbachev hundreds of millions of dollars.
We put missiles on the border right afterwards.
Let me finish. We spent hundreds of $1 million for Gorbachev for democratic reforms. We tried to help the Russians set up a democracy throughout the 90s. We supported Boris Yeltsin, who was a Democrat, a small D Democrat. We mightily assisted him.
Did we put missiles on their
Did I
border?
finish what I'm saying?
Did we put missiles on the
Let me
border?
finish what I'm saying.
If you're paying them money, bribe them
We're not
to accept our hostility and say, look, we're good guys, we're giving you money, but we still have missiles on the border.
Why do we?
Why would they have missiles on the? Why would we
Because-
put missiles on the border?
Because Russia's dangerous.
Well, if you start off
But
with
no,
that view, then you're going to
what
wind up in
missiles-
wars with
what missiles are
everybody.
you talking about? Where? We've never.
We
Do we
put
have
missiles-
U.S. missiles in Poland?
Yes, Poland and in Hungary.
Okay.
Right after it was broken up.
I
You
mean,
can check it out.
I think that's kind of. But I don't think that is what led to the rise of Putin.
I mean, also view this from the perspective of the Polish people and the Hungarian people. They were brutally repressed during the Soviet era. And
Say that
so,
again? I'm sorry.
The Poles and the
their
Hungarians
countries
brutally
were,
suppressed.
yes, their
what?
countries were invaded time and time again. They were occupied. And from their point of view, why should they view Russia as non-threatening? And I guess this is my biggest disagreement with how much of this debate has been framed. Why is it Russia's prerogative to invade countries in Eastern Europe, but the United States' obligation to trust untrustworthy dictators, to not aggress? And the fact of the matter is, we have not started any war recently in Eastern Europe. It was Russia who invaded Georgia, I believe, in 2008. It was Russia who made incursions to Ukraine in 2014. It was Russia who first started putting, whether it's shooting down an airline over Ukraine or building up troops along the Baltic borders, it's Russia who has started, and I know more recently, flying there. I know they've been doing some naval exercises.
It's not our role to straighten out every country. That's not
No,
our
I
role.
understand, but what I'm saying is,
If you
the
check
United
the
States making incursions
how do
into
you say
Europe,
that word?
the United States making incursions into Russia.
The indigenous people of the United States, even today, they're still so pissed off that we took over the United States without compensating them or just by killing them. So we don't have the perfect history. So other countries misbehave too. It's not our role. Our role is to figure out how to keep the peace in this world and push our ideas, push democracy,
I
but in a
100% agree.
constructive
I
way.
100% agree. And that's why I'm saying we have not been the aggressors in this situation at all. We have not invaded countries in the Caucasus. We have not invaded Ukraine. Russia is doing military exercises right now in the north.
We invaded Afghanistan. What are you talking about?
Yeah, we invaded Afghanistan, sure, but I'm talking in
Afghanistan never
and with
attacked
regard
the
to
United States. Afghanistan never attacked the United States. We should have gone after Osama bin Laden.
I mean,
It was
Afghanistan
there,
did.
like
You're
we
right.
did, we finally got him. We went
And-
after a country and lost trillions of dollars over the
And you're
years.
right about that.
Killed
And you're right
many
about that.
civilians. Killed many of our own soldiers. Our own. We have so many deaths. We'll be paying for the next 80 years
I'm
for
not
guys
defending Afghanistan.
that are in veterans
I'm not
hospitals.
And I'm not defending our interventions in Afghanistan. I'm not defending our interventions in Vietnam. But what I'm saying here, first of all, and I think this is a clear distinction that hasn't been articulated, this is not a military intervention right now. There are not American men going and dying in Ukraine. There are not. What we are doing is we are giving Ukraine the technology and the resources to defend themselves. And
Which
so
is
why
legal under international law.
We've sent all kind of military equipment, $75 billion worth.
exactly?
already.
And armies are dying. And the question is,
If that's not a hostile, if you don't consider that a hostile act against a nation, I don't know how you can.
Hostile act against a nation. Ukraine is being invaded.
We're bringing Ukrainian soldiers to the United States to teach them how to use Patriot.
We are
missiles.
allowing people to defend their own country. And we have been clear, by the way, if you read into this, that our weapons are not to be used for aggression into Russia. So to allow an invaded people to prevent themselves from dying is an act of aggression. To allow a country that's been invaded time and time again in a region of the world that's been invaded time and time again by a power that's been shown to invade countries all around it time and time again, that's an act of aggression. Why
How
are
did
we
we-
by allowing a country to defend? in the country that has been. Why is it there for?
How did we react when Russia put missiles in Cuba? Or how would we react if they put it in Bahamas or Mexico?
Well, are we putting missiles on Russia's border aimed at Russia?
No, because you said we're nice guys. We could do anything.
There is a
we're not nice guys.
There is a fundamental difference between
the other side thinks you're not such nice guys.
There is a fundamental difference between allowing a country to defend itself and between positioning missiles in a way that poses a threat to another country. There is not American technology being pointed at Moscow and at St. Petersburg right now, and in fact, we have been clear enough that weapons are not.
Don't let them join. So don't let them join NATO.
No,
NATO is one of the stupidest things we have. We're obligated to go to war if any of those countries gets into a war.
And when was it ever in question that Ukraine was to join NATO? When was this ever in question? Ukraine was never really a prospective NATO member, and as Matt mentioned, the closest they've ever been to NATO, ironically, is now.
And all the more reason why we shouldn't fight for them to be able to get into NATO. We have enough countries in NATO. Is it going to make NATO stronger? Is it going to make NATO stronger if we let Ukraine in?
But we have not been on this conquest to get Ukraine into NATO. It simply hasn't happened that way. In fact, we signed, along with Russia in 1991, I believe, the Budapest Security Memorandum on Ukraine, where in exchange for Ukraine giving up its nuclear weapons, both the United States and Russia volunteered to be guarantors of Ukrainian security. And Russia has brazenly broken that by invading Ukraine. So, in fact, we reached out, we gave an olive branch to Russia. We said, all right, Russia, let's shake hands here. Let's both agree. A nuclear Ukraine is bad for both of us. So how about we, the U.S., and you, Russia, agree, let's just demilitarize Ukraine. Let's let them be demilitarized and guarantee their security. And Russia said yes. So we did attempt peace in 1991. It's the Budapest Security Memorandum. And Russia trounced it, just like they did in Georgia, just like they did in Crimea, just like they did in Luhansk and Donetsk, and just like they did in 2014 following the Euromaidan protests, where when Ukraine's parliament voted out the pro-Russian puppet president, Russia decided to invade. The aggression has been unilateral, and the attempts at peace, be it the Budapest Security Memorandum, have also been unilateral, with the United States extending the olive branch. So the result is not one American soldier has been moved closer to death by this. And yet, millions, probably, of Ukrainian lives have been saved by us allowing them to defend their people. So how does it lead to more bloodshed? How does it lead to more young people dying if we allow an aggressor to continue to be an aggressor?
I admire both your and Matt's wisdom and knowledge, and I really appreciate your strong views and your ability to debate, but you don't realize the other side of the coin, because we say we're nice guys, but if Russia went into Cuba, look at the way we behaved. We almost had a nuclear war. And that wasn't even going to Mexico, just as Mexico is the same as Poland on the borders of Russia.
I'd like to say this first, because you started this by talking about since World War II. And basically what you said is most of our interventions we end up losing. Korea, Vietnam.
No, that isn't what I said.
Most of the wars we end up losing.
I said we had no business going in the first place.
Right. Okay.
Nobody attacked us.
Okay.
I didn't say.
So here's the thing.
We have no business losing.
So you don't think the Cold War was necessary at all? Like the Cold War shouldn't have happened.
I don't know what you mean.
Like the Cold War, like we should have just talked it out.
No, we should. If we could have, we should diplomatically end it, and we did. We never attacked Russia, nor did Russia attack us.
Here's the thing, and I think this is like
that was a diplomatic settlement,
a leading point through.
Did we go to war against Russia? Or the Soviet Union?
The Soviet Union.
Never.
No.
That's the best example of things that could be settled without going to war.
There were tons of. Let me finish what I'm saying. So, the Soviet Union and now Russia are threats to global peace. So, in 1948 in Czechoslovakia, there's a communist coup and takeover, despite the fact that the communists had promised not to do that. In 1953, there is an invasion of South Korea, despite that. Poland, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, all these different places where democratic elections had been promised by Joseph Stalin, they're all turned into communist regimes. And I could keep going on and on with the list and list. So there were threats to global freedom. The Cold War was not a misunderstanding. There were threats to global freedom. Now, Vietnam...
But did it get resolved without going to war?
Had we not gone to war in Korea, had we not gone to war in Korea, had we not given weapons to the Greeks, had we not followed the Truman Doctrine, I think the Soviet Union was far more evil.
What was the Truman Doctrine?
It was to support any, basically it's to support any government. The original line from his speech is to support any government that's fighting an armed communist minority. I think the Truman Doctrine, I think preventing, as much as I can disagree with and criticize capitalism, I think preventing the expansion of Soviet influence throughout the world, which killed millions of people through the collectivization of agriculture, the Great Purges, there was almost a mini Holocaust inside the USSR, as you know, with the Doctor's Plot. Had Joseph Stalin lived another 2 years, he probably would have...
I'm not defending Russia.
But let me finish what I'm saying.
Or the Soviet Union.
But let me finish what I'm saying.
But we resolved it without entering war.
No, yes, we did.
Which war did we...
The Korean War. We directly intervened there, and I'm not saying...
I wasn't against Russia.
Yes, it was. Well, it was against China, and they were part of the global communism is what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is, and there were tons of Russian...
Are you saying a country's not allowed to become communist?
No.
We're allowed to invade it if it becomes communist?
What I'm saying is...
Russia wasn't...
Russia was deeply involved in Korea, and so we had to stop their influence. What I mean to say is that Russian... first it was Soviet, but now it's Russian. Soviet influence throughout the world needed to be stopped. It had to be stopped.
By extension, you'll always be a war then.
But
everything has to be stopped. If Korea is we have to stop because of Russia, there's no limit to it.
But here's the thing: Ukraine is kind of a special case because the Russians are not going to stop at Ukraine.
How about
they have no intention?
How about Taiwan? Is Taiwan special or not?
It's actually kind of interesting. I don't think China would ever actually invade Taiwan because I think they would lose 1 million men in the process. A lot of people like to think that just because D-Day was successful, that was the only option. An amphibious landing is a terrible idea. And China would run out of semiconductors to run all their equipment to even invade by destroying Taiwan. And guess what? Taiwan doesn't want to be part of China. Okay?
But it was. I mean,
but who cares?
But if Texas decided to leave the United States and set up a country, and it's illegal. Well, it was illegal for Taiwan. Taiwan was part of China.
It was illegal for the communist.
Taiwan was part of China.
It's not
Taiwan was the Republic of China, which was originally, I believe, the nationalist government.
Taiwan was never a free republic.
Communist fought the Civil War.
Taiwan was part of China.
Was Taiwan ever part of the? Was Taiwan ever governed by the
Second World War took off, and he wasn't accepted in China.
Was Taiwan ever part of the?
He set up his own country.
Was Taiwan ever under the communist administration, though? Was it ever?
The what?
Was Taiwan ever under the Chinese Communist administration? I thought there was a civil war in China in the 1940s between the nationalists and the communists. The communists won for the most part. The nationalists took refuge in Taiwan and have governed Taiwan since. I don't think it's a case of secession like Texas would be in the United States. It's just a different history.
Exactly the same. Chiang Kai-shek was the leader of China. Chiang Kai-shek was the leader of China for a long while. He was a hero. Madam Chiang Kai-shek was a total hero during the Second World War. And then at the end of the war, they were very unpopular. So he took off and he set up a country in Taiwan, which was part of China.
He didn't take off and set up part of
illegal stuff.
There was a civil war between the nationalists and the communists. And the nationalists settled in Taiwan, and the communists took over the rest of China. It wasn't a part of communist China that then seceded. That it was not some sort of rebellion. it was a civil war where one side flees to Taiwan and the other flees to China. And ever since then, it's sort of
Are you saying,
recognized
Ken, are you
that as
saying that any country that decides to be communist or socialist, we have a right to prevent them from doing that?
absolutely not. Absolutely no. And I'm not justifying your intervention in Vietnam. I'm not saying we were necessarily right to intervene in Korea.
How about Afghanistan?
No, I'm not
about
backing that either.
Afghanistan?
I'm not defending this global imperialism. There's a lot of American global
Well, why
imperialism.
don't we? That's my
I
point.
oppose global
Why
imperialism.
not try diplomacy?
We tried that.
And we did.
What
We
do-
did.
what-
In the
what do we
1990s,
try?
with the Budapest Security Memorandum, we did try diplomacy. We got at a round
Where?
table with
Where?
Russia
When?
in Budapest, Hungary in the 1990s. It's called the Budapest Security Memorandum.
Did we
got
try
it.
diplomacy?
We did. We absolutely
Did we try
did.
diplomacy in any of the wars we've entered?
No, not yes. Yes, we did. We got at a round
Which
table
one?
in Budapest
Which one?
with Russia, with European representatives, with Ukrainian representatives, and we shook hands and we got Ukraine to surrender their nuclear weapons in exchange for US and Russia to guarantee Ukraine's security. And what does Russia do? It goes ahead and invades Ukraine. That was our attempt at diplomacy. And
Because Russia said Ukraine wants to join NATO, which wants to attack
Ukraine
Russia.
never applied for NATO. Ukraine joining NATO has never been a serious question. There's never been a
So
serious
why go to war over it?
So why is there
Putin
the war is not
articulated.
NATO?
Putin articulated. I don't know if he would have. I don't believe he would have kept his word. But I'd say, why not try diplomacy instead of losing
we
lives
tried-
on both sides?
We
I'm
tried diplomacy
I'm
before Russia
sad for
started
the-
invading its
I'm
neighbors.
sad for the soldiers on the other side that killed too, because they're nice guys. They're
We
good
tried-
people.
But here's the thing, honestly, and I'm sure you've known a lot more liars.
Honestly,
I think
the rest
you're-
wasn't.
No,
the rest of what
no.
you said wasn't
No,
honestly.
you were a businessman.
Why do you have to preface it?
No, hold on a second. You've been a businessman for much longer than I have, for 60 years, so you can tell a liar better than probably anyone, or better than I can.
You could be you
I have
are
a question.
You're a lot brighter than me. Maybe you could.
After years of diplomacy, right? If Putin really just wanted to say, "F it, I'm just going to invade Ukraine," don't you think a really good thing to do to try to convince people like you that are sympathetic to not wanting to lose lives is to, in bad faith, just say, "If only they had given up NATO membership, I wouldn't have invaded." Like, of course he didn't mean that.
One of the things that you put down is, if Trump were president, would we be in a war with
Of
Ukraine?
course. And Trump- of course.
I don't.
No, of course.
As you know, I don't find Trump. And any redeeming virtues for Trump, but I don't believe we'd be at war.
Well, here's
Because he wanted out of NATO, Trump.
here's the thing. I think
He didn't want to be tied to their.
But you really believe that Vladimir Putin didn't just say that to be strategic, just to get people
I don't
sympathetic to his side?
Maybe, but you test them.
But
Isn't it worth testing them?
No, but let's
to avoid a war.
But guess
and
what?
maybe a nuclear war.
Ukraine
We
hasn't
still
been
haven't
part of
ruled out a
Ukraine-
nuclear war.
Ukraine hasn't been part of NATO for 30 years.
So then
why doesn't he believe it?
No, so then why don't they
And he's
agree
been-
quick?
he's
Why
been
don't
in
they?
power for 20.
That's all the more reason why we should agree quickly.
No, it's not.
Why?
Why is he insisting? Why is it?
They're not
why is
part
it-
of NATO.
but why is it on us to prove to him? It should be on him to not commit war crimes and invade. Why is it on him to prove
Because because it's like we did with Cuba. Why isn't Cuba allowed to?
There are no nukes.
Why is
But there
why
are
is
nukes in
why
Ukraine.
is why isn't Cuba? Why wasn't Cuba allowed to have armaments? But
there are no
they're
nukes
an
in
independent country.
There are no nukes in Ukraine.
It doesn't matter. They have access to do whatever they want.
No, they
to
don't.
Ukraine.
They don't have access to any nukes.
What do you mean? Once they become part of NATO, they could do anything they want.
But they were never
They're part
going-
of NATO.
No, they're not. Ukraine is not part of NATO.
No, but he said that.
He said that. He said that as a last.
Why don't you? So why don't you test them?
I would not. We've been testing him for 20 years, and he's been testing us, and we failed over and over again.
When did we test them? On what did we test them?
On what did we test him?
Yeah.
No, he's been testing us. We've never put in meaningful sanctions that actually deterred him after the invasion of Georgia, after the invasion of Crimea, after all of these things.
So
He's just going to keep. So you're fine with him just going around and keep doing what he's
no,
doing?
we had peace after Crimea. He said Crimea was legitimately part of Russia.
So why didn't we have peace?
So
Why
we
was there?
did have peace the last 7 years.
Yeah, and then what happened? He kept going.
He didn't keep going.
Yes, he did.
There was no war going on before.
Yeah.
There was no war
No,
between
he
Russia
kept going. He kept going. By
kept
invading
going
Ukraine,
where?
he was going to take over the whole country.
Which country?
Ukraine. He sent in the first units that crossed the Ukrainian border were Russian units, and you know what they had in their backpacks? They had their celebratory uniforms because they thought that they were going to march to Kiev,
I know
overthrow the leader, and take over the
I
whole
agree
country.
with you that totally. He
No,
expected,
you know,
he expected
but no,
that fall
they
in an
expected,
hour.
they expected
Right.
it to be. It was a coup that turned into an invasion.
But why not try diplomacy? That's my point.
Because you can.
The reason we're in
can't
all these
reason.
wars-
Churchill said you can't reason
Why-
with a tiger
why-
when its head it's in your mouth.
Is there any other country in the world that's in as many wars as the United States?
I
Major wars.
think probably
You think-
so.
You think what?
I think probably so. I think China's been probably involved in a lot of major wars. I think Russia's probably been involved in a lot of
And
major
I don't know
wars.
about them. Where did you read that China's
What,
involved in wars?
In modern times,
Yeah.
I think that they're.
What was the last war China was involved with?
I mean, they're currently.
The Second World War against Japan.
There's war
What
at
was the last-
the China-India
What?
border right now. There's been conflict at the
There's-
China-India border right now.
There's always a conflict at
They
They
borders.
took over Tibet in 49.
That's not-
They
that's not-
took over Tibet in 49. You could argue that what they're doing to the Uyghur Muslims is a conquest in and of itself.
Genocide
China
too.
also, yeah, a genocide too. They conquered Hong Kong.
I don't know why what we do is right and what other countries do is wrong. The United States, the Mexican-American War took over the most valuable part of the United States.
Give it back.
California,
Let's give it back.
let's give it back.
Yeah.
The name of that is Fat Shin. If Mexico tried to take back California,
You know why we're better?
Wait a
You know
second.
why we're better?
California, Texas, Arizona, and what's
Do you
the
know?
other?
Do you know why I think we're better? Because we can sit in a room and have these discussions about why we think it's better, right? Why we think our way is better. But you know what you can't do?
I think this country is the best in the world.
Right. But you know what you
But I
can't.
think
But you know
that-
what you can't do in a. You know.
Even good people could do bad
But you know what you
things.
can't do in Russia or China? You can't have discussions like this
So that's
and record it and put
that's
it out.
not my problem.
But
I don't want to impose my values
do you wanna live
on
in-
that country.
do you wanna live
with our soldiers, with
do you,
our
but do you want to
with
live?
our lives?
Do you want to live in a world where?
I don't want to move there. No.
But do you
I
wanna-
don't want to live there. No.
Do you want to live in a world where that kind of tyranny?
I want
is
to live in a
imposed?
world where there's no wars.
Right, but
I want to outlaw all wars.
But they're that. But
I
tough
want to
luck.
outlaw all wars.
Tough luck. They won't agree.
What?
I guess my
I would
question
agree
is,
to that.
yeah,
But they wouldn't.
How about you, Ben?
yeah. So why do you believe that the U.S. not supporting Ukraine will bring about a world with fewer wars?
What?
Why
I'm
do you
sorry, I
believe?
missed that.
Yeah. Why do you believe that a world in which the United States does not support Ukraine will have fewer wars?
I didn't say anything like that.
Because the argument I'm making is I agree with
I said the United States should first try maximally
did.
before they go to war
we did.
diplomacy.
and we did. And
What kind of diplomacy did we try in Afghanistan?
We tried for months. Bush offered. He told the main Taliban guy that was in charge. He gave him 2 or 3 months to turn over Osama between November and
But you
December.
don't go to war over one guy.
It was not. I wasn't. Sure, you're right.
You're
But
gonna
we
tell-
did. It was what we
So that's exactly my point. We shouldn't. We should do exactly what we did at the end for Osama. Track him down and kill him.
No, but the
But we can't tell a country, give us this guy because we want him.
because he waged an attack on our country, killing 3,000 of our citizens in our biggest
we
city.
should go after
And
so we
saying,
should
oh,
go after
okay, you
him.
can harbor him?
Ben, I couldn't agree with you more. We have to go after him with all our might and with all our resources. But we shouldn't attack a country and spend trillions of dollars. We have nothing to show for it. We're back where they don't let the women go to school anymore. We're back before, and we spend trillions of dollars. If we spent our money in the United States, we'd have the greatest infrastructure in the world.
And even with all of this being true, even if all of this is completely true, why does this suggest that we should not be supporting Ukraine? Because I see this as a fundamentally different situation than the American
I said we should.
in Afghanistan.
We should have gone to war.
Or in Korea.
We should go to war in Ukraine. Only after we try everything else.
But we're not. No one's suggesting.
We're not going to.
We didn't try saying to Putin, okay, if you attack, we won't let. We didn't need him we didn't need a Ukraine in NATO. It didn't add to the strength of NATO. There was no plus for the rest of the world. But so if Putin said, if you don't let Ukraine into NATO, I won't attack. Why wouldn't you at least try diplomatically to say, okay, we'll do that, but God damn it, if you attack, NATO is going to attack you, and the United States is going to be one of the countries that attacks you.
Well, first of all, Ukraine joining NATO was never really a serious discussion at any point. That was
Okay,
not
so then-
really, it was not ever
that's
really.
all the more reason why you say okay.
And
They
second of all,
weren't part of a
it's
serious
not like
discussion.
and second of all,
They
it's
weren't
not
part
like
of a
the
serious
United,
discussion.
second of all, it's not like the United States just takes countries into NATO. It has to be everyone in NATO. It has to be a unanimous decision by every NATO member. And as Matt's
We
pointed
could have
out,
agreed. We could have agreed with Russia
and
that
at
they
the
won't
same
be
time,
invited.
it's
Any one
not
country.
like-
I don't know if you know the rule in NATO is any one country could object to a new member.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's not
that's why
like we
Steve
have
didn't
also
know that.
coerced the Baltics into joining NATO. It's not like we told Estonia, you must join NATO. No, Estonia brought Estonia into
We
NATO.
didn't tell
The United-
anybody to join NATO. We shouldn't allow them to join. That's all.
And
Just
why
because
should we not allow countries?
We shouldn't allow troops to be or missiles to come to Cuba.
So why should
and
we
face the
not
United
allow
States.
Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, liberal democracies in the European Union, to be liberal democracies in the European Union? Because we just have to look after the interest of this imperialist country that wants.
We're allowing them to be.
Why should we be bending over and be conceding Europe away from a liberal democratic sphere into a much more authoritarian one for the sake of appeasing this big bear that showed no signs of appeasement? Right? Georgia wasn't enough.
Hey, we only have 5 minutes left.
Ukraine
So you
wasn't
guys convinced me. You guys convinced me we shouldn't pursue diplomacy. We should go to war anytime there's an upheaval.
And no,
Anywhere in the world.
we absolutely should not go to war, and we're not going to war. We absolutely should not
We wound
send
up in
a
all
soldier.
these wars. We were
should
never
not send
attacked.
American soldiers to die in Ukraine.
Man, we
And
were never attacked. The United States has
moment we
never been
send-
attacked.
the moment we
United
send an
States is-
American soldier to die
the
in
United-
Ukraine, I'm with you. I don't think that's a good idea. But that's not what we're doing. We're not
Ukraine
sending American
needs
soldiers
a
to die in
Ben,
Ukraine. We're not in a war
And the
right now.
United States has never been attacked. Never been attacked. And we've been in all these wars. How do you account for that?
Well, I think never been
Because
attacked.
we're a big bully.
I think you can make the argument in World War II Pearl Harbor was very much attacked. I think you can argue 9/11 was very much an attack on the United States, not by Afghanistan, but by
Look, I love
a
the United
terrorist group
States.
led
That's
by
the only
Osama bin
country I live
Laden.
in.
And so that drove a
So
lot of the
I'm not
intervention there.
criticizing the
But I'll
United
also
States.
say a lot of our
I'm
wars have been
criticizing
completely
the
unjustified.
management. I could
I
love a company
disagree
and
with
invest in
our
it.
intervention
I
in
could still
Vietnam.
criticize the
I don't
management.
think we should have done it.
And
I'm
saying
not.
the
I
management of
disagree
this
with the
country
Iraq War.
has
I'm not
been
saying we should have done it. So I
indifferent
agree with
to
you
losing
that a lot of this
American
American
lives,
interventionism
young
is
men and women.
unprovoked
To me,
and
I
wrong.
value them.
But
They're
that
much
doesn't
more
mean
precious than
that
any
it is
winning any
our
battle
that now
in
we've
any
been
other
tarred
country.
with this.
That's it. But anyway, you guys made a great argument, and I'm going to convert. You're very bright. I really thank you for your views and for beating up on me and for standing up for what you believe in. But think about what I said too, please. Okay? I will definitely consider all that you said. That's the way we learn. Oh, Ben, even Matt shook my hand. Ben copped out.
No, I think the internet broke.
I know. Okay, thank you, Matt. You guys were brilliant. We're going to find another subject that